The neon lights of Las Vegas cast their electric glow across Mike Tyson's weathered face as he stepped out of the black limousine. The year was 2003, and the former heavyweight champion carried the weight of 1,000 battles in his eyes. His career had crumbled, his fortune had vanished, and his reputation lay in tatters across the front pages of every major newspaper in America. Mike pulled his jacket tighter against the desert wind that swept through the city streets. He wasn't here for glory or championship belts tonight. He was here because of desperation, the kind that gnaws at a man's soul until he makes choices he never thought possible. The phone call that brought him to this moment still echoed in his mind. "Mike, we need you," the voice had said. It belonged to Tommy Rodriguez, a local boxing promoter who ran underground fights in the forgotten corners of the city. "There's good money in it, and nobody has to know." The idea of fighting in basement arenas for pocket change would have insulted the Mike Tyson of 10 years ago. But this wasn't that man anymore. This was someone who had lost everything and needed every dollar he could find. Child support payments loomed over him like storm clouds, and his legal team demanded payments he couldn't make. As Mike walked down the dimming street toward the warehouse district, memories flooded his consciousness. He remembered the roar of crowds at Madison Square Garden, the flash of cameras capturing his victories, the respect in opponents' eyes before he destroyed their dreams. Those days felt like someone else's life now. The neighborhood around him told its own story of decline. Broken streetlights created pools of darkness between patches of yellow illumination. Graffiti covered most of the building walls, and the few people on the sidewalks hurried past without making eye contact. This wasn't the glamorous world of professional boxing that had once been his kingdom. Mike's phone buzzed against his chest. He pulled it out and saw a text message from his daughter. "Dad, I believe in you. Whatever you're going through, you'll get through it." The words hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken in the ring. She didn't know about tonight's plan, about how far he'd fallen, about the choices he was making to survive. He stopped walking and leaned against a lamppost, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was about to do. Fighting in illegal matches meant risking everything he had left. If the boxing commission discovered his involvement, they could ban him permanently. If the police caught wind of the operation, he could face serious criminal charges. But the alternative was worse. Bankruptcy court proceedings had already begun, and his lawyers warned him about possible jail time for unpaid debts. The man who once earned $30 million for a single fight now counted every dollar in his wallet like it might be his last. The warehouse came into view 3 blocks ahead, its industrial silhouette stark against the desert sky. Mike could see cars parked around the building and figures moving in the shadows. His heart began pounding with a familiar rhythm, the same pulse he'd felt before every major fight of his career. This wasn't how champions were supposed to end their stories. This wasn't the retirement he'd imagined during his glory days. But life had taught Mike Tyson that survival sometimes required embracing the darkness, even when it meant compromising everything you once stood for. As he approached the building, Mike noticed a police car parked across the street. 2 officers sat inside, apparently unaware of the illegal activities about to unfold mere yards from their position. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he stood, once the most famous athlete in the world, now sneaking around like a common criminal to make ends meet. The warehouse door opened, and Tommy Rodriguez emerged with a nervous smile. "Mike, you made it," he said, extending his hand. "Everything's set up inside. The crowd's getting excited." Mike shook Tommy's hand but said nothing. Words felt inadequate for this moment. He was crossing a line he'd never imagined crossing, entering a world that existed in the shadows of legitimate sport. The decision was made, but the consequences remained unknown. Inside the warehouse, the sound of voices and movement grew louder. Mike could smell the familiar scent of boxing gyms. Sweat, leather, and ambition mixed together in the stale air. But there was something different here, something darker and more desperate than the professional arenas he'd known. As they walked toward the makeshift ring in the center of the building, Mike caught sight of the crowd gathering around the ropes. These weren't the wealthy spectators who had paid thousands to watch his championship fights. These were people from the streets, hungry for entertainment and willing to risk everything on underground gambling. The next few hours would change everything. Mike Tyson, the kid from Brooklyn who had conquered the boxing world, was about to discover that sometimes the hardest fights happen when nobody's keeping score, when the stakes are survival itself, and when victory might look exactly like defeat. The warehouse erupted in chaos the moment Mike Tyson stepped into the light. Voices screamed his name from every corner of the building, but these weren't the polished cheers of arena crowds. These were raw, desperate sounds from people who had bet their grocery money on underground fights and saw dollar signs walking toward the ring. Mike's opponent waited in the opposite corner, a mountain of muscle named Carlos, the Crusher Martinez. Carlos had built his reputation in these illegal circuits, destroying smaller fighters while avoiding the spotlight of professional boxing. At 6 feet 4 inches and 260 pounds, he looked like a man who could tear through concrete walls with his bare hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tommy Rodriguez announced through a crackling microphone, "tonight we witness history in the making." His voice carried across the warehouse, bouncing off metal walls and concrete floors. In this corner, the undisputed former heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson. The crowd's reaction shook the building's foundation. Some people climbed onto chairs and crates to get better views, while others pushed forward against the makeshift barriers surrounding the ring. Money changed hands rapidly as bookmakers shouted odds and took desperate bets from spectators, who saw this as their chance to strike it rich. Mike looked across the ring at Carlos and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine uncertainty. This wasn't a sanctioned match with referees, medical staff, and safety regulations. This was bare-knuckle survival, where rules meant nothing and mercy was a luxury nobody could afford. The bell rang, and Carlos charged forward like a freight train. His first punch missed Mike's head by inches, but the wind from his massive fist reminded everyone present that this was no exhibition match. Mike slipped to the side and landed a sharp jab to Carlos's ribs, feeling the satisfying impact of knuckle against muscle. But something was wrong. Mike's timing felt off, his movements slower than they should be. Years of legal troubles, financial stress, and personal demons had taken their toll on his legendary reflexes. Carlos seemed to sense this weakness immediately and pressed his advantage with ruthless efficiency. A devastating uppercut caught Mike under the chin, snapping his head back and sending stars exploding across his vision. The crowd's roar became a distant echo as he stumbled backward, fighting to maintain his balance on unsteady legs. Blood trickled from his nose, and for the first time in his career, Mike Tyson felt truly vulnerable. Carlos followed up with a series of body shots that drove the air from Mike's lungs. Each punch landed like a sledgehammer, and Mike realized that his reputation alone wouldn't carry him through this fight. He needed to dig deeper than ever before, to find reserves of strength and determination that he thought had disappeared forever. The warehouse lights seemed to dim as Mike backed against the ropes, absorbing punishment while searching for an opening. In the crowd, he caught glimpses of faces twisted with bloodlust and greed. These people didn't care about his legacy or his struggles. They wanted violence, and they wanted it now. But then something shifted inside Mike's consciousness. The sound of his daughter's voice from earlier that evening cut through the chaos. "I believe in you." Those words ignited a fire that had been dormant for months, maybe years. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about proving to himself that the fighter inside him still existed. Mike slipped Carlos's next punch and countered with a left hook that connected perfectly with his opponent's temple. The big man's eyes went wide with surprise and pain, and for the first time since the fight began, he took a step backward. The crowd sensed the shift in momentum immediately, their cheers becoming even more frenzied. What followed was pure instinct and muscle memory. Mike's hands moved with deadly precision, each punch calculated to inflict maximum damage. Carlos tried to respond, but he was fighting a legend who had rediscovered his killer instinct. The combinations came in waves: hooks, uppercuts, and straight rights that landed with bone-crushing force. Carlos stumbled and fell to one knee, blood streaming from cuts above both eyes. The crowd fell silent for a moment, stunned by the sudden reversal. Then the noise exploded again, twice as loud as before, as people realized they were witnessing something special. But victory came with a price. As Carlos struggled to his feet, Mike heard something that made his blood run cold. sirens in the distance, growing louder by the second. Someone had tipped off the police about the illegal fight, and now everyone in the warehouse faced potential arrest. Tommy Rodriguez grabbed the microphone with panic in his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to wrap this up immediately," he announced. "Security concerns require us to end tonight's festivities." The crowd began moving toward the exits, but not everyone could escape quickly. The warehouse had limited ways out, and dozens of people pushed toward the same doors simultaneously. Mike realized that his problems had just multiplied exponentially. Getting caught in a police raid would destroy what remained of his reputation and guarantee serious legal consequences. As the sirens grew closer, Mike made a decision that would define the rest of his story. Instead of running with the crowd, he walked toward the warehouse's back exit, where he noticed a small group of people who seemed to know something others didn't. Sometimes the most dangerous path was also the only way to survival. Detective Sarah Chun had been tracking illegal boxing operations for 3 years, but tonight felt different. Her informant's tip about Mike Tyson's involvement had sent shockwaves through the police department, and now she sat in an unmarked car watching the warehouse with a mixture of professional duty and personal conflict. Sarah had grown up watching Tyson's fights with her father, a Chinese immigrant who taught her that boxing represented the purest form of human determination. She'd seen Tyson rise from poverty to become the youngest heavyweight champion in history, and she'd witnessed his spectacular fall from grace. The idea of arresting her childhood hero filled her with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "All units, we have confirmation of illegal gambling and unsanctioned fighting," crackled the voice through her radio. "Move in on my signal." But Sarah hesitated. Through her binoculars, she could see people streaming out of the warehouse in obvious panic. Among them, she spotted a familiar figure moving toward the building's rear exit. Mike Tyson himself, bloodied but walking with the same confident stride she remembered from his championship days. Her partner, Detective Rodriguez, noticed her hesitation. "Chun, what's the holdup? We need to move before they all disappear into the night." Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of calling for backup to surround the building, she grabbed her radio and spoke quietly. "This is Detective Chun. I'm pursuing a suspect on foot, moving to the east side of the building." She left her partner behind and circled around to intercept Mike before he could escape into the maze of industrial buildings beyond the warehouse. Her heart pounded as she approached the man who had once been the most feared fighter on the planet. "Mr. Tyson," she called out as he reached the exit. "LVPD. I need you to stop." Mike turned slowly, his hands raised slightly to show he posed no threat. Blood still trickled from his nose, and his knuckles were swollen from the fight, but his eyes held no fear. "Officer, I know how this looks," he said quietly. "It looks like you were participating in illegal boxing matches," Sarah replied, trying to maintain her professional composure. "Do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" Mike nodded, but he didn't try to run or make excuses. "I understand completely," he said. "I also understand that you could have called for backup before approaching me alone." Sarah realized he was right. Her decision to confront him solo went against protocol and put both of them in a complicated position. "Why didn't you run with everyone else?" she asked. "Because running doesn't solve problems," Mike answered. "It just postpones them." For a moment, they stood in silence while sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah found herself studying Mike's face, seeing traces of the young fighter who had captured the world's attention decades earlier. But she also saw something else, genuine remorse and a weariness that came from making too many wrong choices. "Mr. Tyson, I grew up watching your fights," Sarah said finally. "My father used to say you represented the American dream, that you proved anyone could rise above their circumstances." Mike's expression softened. "Your father sounds like a wise man. I'm sorry I let him down." "The question is, what happens now?" Sarah asked. "I have a job to do, but I also have discretion in how I do it." Mike looked toward the warehouse, where other officers were beginning to arrest fleeing spectators. "Those people in there, most of them are just trying to survive. They bet money they couldn't afford to lose, because they're desperate for hope. Arresting them won't solve their problems." "And what about you?" Sarah pressed. What's your excuse? Mike was quiet for a long moment. I don't have one, he said finally. I made choices that brought me here, and now I have to live with the consequences. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the arrogant champion she'd expected to encounter. This was a broken man who had lost his way and was trying to find a path back to dignity. Her radio crackled again, demanding her location, but she ignored it. Mr. Tyson, I'm going to make you an offer, she said. You can come with me now, and we can handle this quietly. No media circus, no public humiliation. But in exchange, you need to help me shut down these illegal operations permanently. Mike's eyebrows raised in surprise. You want me to become an informant? I want you to become part of the solution, Sarah corrected. These underground fights are destroying communities. They're connected to drug trafficking, money laundering, and violence that goes far beyond boxing. You have credibility in this world that I'll never have. The proposal hung in the air between them like morning mist. Mike understood the implications immediately. Cooperation with law enforcement could protect him from serious charges, but it would also make him a target for people who operated in the shadows. If I agree to help you, Mike said slowly, what guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word? Sarah reached into her jacket and pulled out her business card, writing her personal cell phone number on the back. You have my word as an officer and as someone who still believes in second chances. Mike took the card and studied it carefully. Detective Chun, you're taking a huge risk. If your superiors find out about this arrangement, it could end your career. Some things are worth the risk, Sarah replied. The question is whether you think redemption is worth fighting for. As other officers appeared around the corner of the building, Sarah made a quick decision. Officers, I have Mr. Tyson in custody, she announced. He's cooperating fully with our investigation. Mike allowed her to place handcuffs on his wrists, but he whispered quietly, Detective Chun, I hope you know what you're doing. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something that gave her confidence in her choice. Mr. Tyson, I think we're about to find out together. 3 weeks after his arrest, Mike Tyson sat in a downtown diner at 2 a.m, nursing black coffee and waiting for Detective Chun to arrive. The media had somehow gotten wind of his involvement in underground boxing, and his face had been plastered across every sports website and tabloid magazine in the country. The headlines were brutal. Fallen champion hits rock bottom. Iron Mike's illegal fight club. And from glory to gutter, Tyson's latest shame. Each article felt like another punch to his already battered reputation, but Mike had learned to absorb punishment both in and out of the ring. Detective Chin slipped into the booth across from him, looking exhausted from working double shifts to keep their arrangement secret. How are you holding up? She asked, signaling the waitress for coffee. I've been better, Mike replied honestly, but I'm still standing, which is more than I could say a month ago. Sarah pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table between them. I need to show you something that's going to be difficult to see, she said. We've been monitoring the underground fighting circuit since your arrest, and it's worse than we initially thought. The photographs in the folder showed young fighters, some barely out of their teens, participating in brutal matches that left them permanently injured. Mike's stomach turned as he studied the images of broken bones, brain trauma, and scarred faces that would never heal properly. These kids are being exploited by the same people who organized your fight, Sarah explained. They're promised easy money and a chance at professional careers that will never materialize. Most of them end up addicted to painkillers or worse. Mike pushed the photos away, unable to look at them anymore. What do you need me to do? We've identified the main organizer behind these operations, Sarah continued. His name is Vincent Torres, and he's been running illegal fights across 3 states. He's also connected to drug trafficking and money laundering operations that generate millions in illegal revenue. The name meant nothing to Mike, but Sarah's description painted a picture of someone far more dangerous than Tommy Rodriguez, the small-time promoter who had organized his warehouse fight. Torres wants to meet with you, Sarah said. Word on the street is that he's planning something big, and he thinks having Mike Tyson's name attached to it will bring in serious money from high-rolling gamblers. Mike felt a chill run down his spine. You want me to get involved with this guy? I want you to help us take him down, Sarah corrected. We can't get close to him through normal channels. He's too careful, too well-connected. But he'll trust you because you're already compromised. He thinks you're desperate enough to do anything for money. The plan Sarah outlined was complex and dangerous. Mike would agree to fight in Torres's operation while wearing a wire to record incriminating conversations. The evidence they gathered would be used to prosecute not just Torres, but his entire network of associates and financial backers. What if something goes wrong? Mike asked. What if they discover I'm working with you? Sarah's expression grew serious. Then you'll be in more danger than you've ever faced in any boxing ring. Mike stared out the diner window at the empty streets of Las Vegas, considering his options. He could walk away from this arrangement, face the charges from his warehouse arrest, and hope for lenient sentencing. Or he could dive deeper into the criminal underworld, risking his life to help save kids who reminded him of his younger self. There's something else you should know, Sarah added quietly. Torres has been asking questions about your financial situation. He knows you're facing bankruptcy, and he's prepared to offer you more money than you've seen in years. The temptation would be enormous, Mike realized. Torres would dangle enough cash to solve his immediate problems, maybe even enough to start over somewhere far from Las Vegas and its painful memories. But accepting that money would mean abandoning the kids in those photographs, leaving them to face the same exploitation that had nearly destroyed him. Detective Chun, Mike said finally, my whole life, people have expected me to make the wrong choices. They've assumed that because I came from nothing, I'd always choose the easy path over the right path. Sarah waited for him to continue. Maybe it's time I surprised everyone, including myself. 2 hours later, Mike walked out of the diner with the recording device taped to his chest and Detective Chen's phone number memorized. The sun was beginning to rise over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that reminded him of championship belts he'd once worn with pride. His phone rang as he reached his car. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but Mike knew who it was before he answered. Mr. Tyson, said a smooth voice with a slight accent. This is Vincent Torres. I believe we have business to discuss. Mike took a deep breath and stepped into the most important fight of his career. Mr. Torres, I'm listening. The conversation that followed would set in motion events that would test every lesson Mike had learned about courage, loyalty, and the true meaning of victory. For the first time in years, he felt like he was fighting for something bigger than money or fame. He was fighting for his soul. Vincent Torres's mansion sat like a fortress in the hills overlooking Las Vegas, its windows glowing against the desert night. Mike Tyson adjusted the wire tape beneath his shirt and tried to calm his racing heart as he walked up the marble steps to the front door. Detective Chen's voice echoed in his earpiece, barely audible but reassuringly present. Remember, we need him to incriminate himself on tape, she whispered. Get him talking about the drug connections and the money laundering operation. The door opened to reveal Torres himself, a man in his 50s with silver hair and expensive clothes that couldn't hide the predator's gleam in his eyes. Mr. Tyson, he said with false warmth, welcome to my home. I've been looking forward to this meeting. The mansion's interior spoke of wealth built on suffering. Original paintings hung beside photographs of Torres, with various celebrities and politicians, all of them apparently unaware of his criminal enterprises. Mike followed him through hallways lined with marble statues and crystal chandeliers. You have a beautiful home, Mike said, playing his role as the desperate ex-champion. Success has its rewards, Torres replied, just as failure has its consequences. I understand you've experienced both extremes. They settled into leather chairs in Torres' study, surrounded by shelves of books that looked like they'd never been opened. Torres poured expensive whiskey into crystal glasses, but Mike declined the drink, claiming he was in training. Straight to business then, Torres said. I have a proposition that could solve all your financial problems. One fight, winner takes all. $5 million guaranteed, regardless of the outcome. Mike's eyes widened with genuine surprise. $5 million would eliminate his debts and provide security for his children's future. But he forced himself to remember the photographs of injured fighters that Detective Chun had shown him. "That's a lot of money," Mike said carefully. "What's the catch?" Torres laughed, but the sound held no humor. "No catch, just business. I have clients who will pay enormous sums to see you fight again. They don't care about boxing commissions or legal sanctions. They want to see Iron Mike Tyson destroy another man." "Who would I be fighting?" Mike asked. "A fighter named Beast Morozov," Torres replied. "Russian, unstoppable, undefeated in underground circuits across Europe. He's killed 2 men in the ring, both ruled accidents by friendly officials." The casual way Torres mentioned the deaths made Mike's blood run cold. "You want me to fight a killer?" "I want you to kill a killer," Torres corrected. "That's what my clients are paying to see. Pure, unregulated violence between 2 legends of underground fighting." Mike forced himself to lean forward with apparent interest. "And you're sure the money is guaranteed?" Torres smiled and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. He entered a combination and withdrew a briefcase filled with cash. "1 million is a good faith payment," he said, setting it on the desk. "The remaining 4 million after the fight." The sight of so much money was overwhelming. Mike hadn't seen this much cash since his championship days, and every instinct screamed at him to take it and run. But Detective Chen's voice in his earpiece reminded him of his true mission. "Mr. Torres, this is obviously more than just gambling money," Mike said. "Where does this kind of cash come from?" Torres's expression hardened slightly. "Does it matter? Money is money, whether it comes from betting, pharmaceuticals, or any other business venture." "Pharmaceuticals." Mike pressed, knowing this was the opening Chen needed. "My organization has diverse interests," Torres said carefully. "We import goods from various countries, sometimes through channels that avoid unnecessary bureaucratic interference." Mike realized he was walking a tightrope. Push too hard, and Torres would become suspicious. Not hard enough, and they wouldn't get the evidence needed for prosecution. "I'm not a naive man," Mike said. "I know this money doesn't come from selling cookies. I just need to know I can trust you to honor our agreement." Torres relaxed visibly. "Mr. Tyson, in my line of work, reputation is everything. I've never broken a deal with a fighter, and I'm not about to start with someone of your stature." "Your line of work being what exactly?" Mike asked. "Entertainment," Torres said with a predatory smile. "I provide entertainment for people who can afford to pay premium prices. Sometimes that entertainment involves boxing. Sometimes it involves other forms of pharmaceutical enhancement. My clients have expensive tastes and unlimited budgets." Mike felt his stomach clench as he realized the full scope of Torres's operation. This wasn't just illegal boxing. It was a network that exploited desperate fighters while funneling drug money through underground gambling operations. "And the fighters you work with," Mike continued, "they're all willing participants." Torres shrugged. "They're all hungry for opportunity. I provide that opportunity. What they do with it is their choice." "Even the ones who end up permanently injured?" For a moment, Torres's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath his polished exterior. "Mr. Tyson, I think you're asking too many questions for someone who needs my money as badly as you do." Mike realized he'd pushed too far. Torres was becoming suspicious, and the situation was about to turn dangerous. But before he could respond, Torres's phone rang with an urgent tone. "Excuse me," Torres said, answering the call. Mike watched his face change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "Are you certain?" Torres asked. "When?" His eyes locked onto Mike with sudden understanding. Torres ended the call and reached into his desk drawer. Mike knew what was coming before he saw the gun. "Mr. Tyson," Torres said quietly, "it seems we have a problem. That was my contact in the police department. Detective Chun has been asking very specific questions about my operations. Questions that suggest she has inside information." Mike's training took over. Instead of panicking, he became perfectly still, every muscle coiled for action. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Remove your shirt," Torres commanded, pointing the gun directly at Mike's chest. Mike knew the game was over. In seconds, Torres would discover the recording device, and realize he'd been betrayed. But instead of fear, Mike felt something he hadn't experienced in years: absolute clarity of purpose. "You know what, Mr. Torres?" Mike said, standing slowly with his hands visible. "You're right. I have been working with Detective Chun, and everything you just said is being recorded by the Las Vegas Police Department." Torres's face twisted with rage, but before he could pull the trigger, Mike moved with the speed that had once made him the most feared fighter in the world. He dove to the side as the gun fired, then closed the distance between them in a heartbeat. What followed lasted only seconds, but felt like an eternity. Years of rage, frustration, and self-hatred poured out of Mike in a combination of punches that sent Torres crashing into his own bookshelf. The gun flew across the room as Torres collapsed, unconscious but breathing. Mike grabbed his phone and called Detective Chun. "It's over," he said simply. "I got everything you need, but you better get here fast." 20 minutes later, the mansion was surrounded by police vehicles. As Torres was led away in handcuffs, Detective Chun approached Mike with something he hadn't seen in months: respect. "You did good work tonight," she said. "That recording will put Torres and his entire operation away for decades." Mike watched the police cars disappear into the night, carrying with them a piece of his old life that he was finally ready to leave behind. "Detective Chun, what happens to me now?" "Now you go home," she said. "The district attorney has agreed to drop all charges related to your warehouse fight in exchange for your cooperation. You're free to rebuild your life however you choose." As Mike drove away from the mansion, he realized that freedom was exactly what he'd found. Not the kind of freedom that came from avoiding consequences, but the kind that came from facing them head-on and discovering that redemption was possible even for someone who'd fallen as far as he had. The sun was rising over Las Vegas as Mike Tyson drove toward his daughter's apartment, ready to tell her a story about her father that she could finally be proud of. He'd fought his last illegal fight, faced his demons, and discovered that the most important victories happened outside the ring. For the first time in years, Mike Tyson was truly free.